Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Rebecca and Rebecca. My name is Rebecca Yager and my partner in crime is Rebecca Reed. Hey Rebecca.
Hey, how are you?
Man, we're doing great. We're excited today to talk about books again. Don't we love this?
Yes,
It's great. All right, today we are talking. You're ready to get at it.
I am.
Today, we're discussing a book called Reaching into Silence by Linda Sammaritan. It's the first book in the World Without Sound series. And let me tell you a little bit about it, and then we'll get started with it. Um, Labeled as a rubella baby back in 1964-65, near the start of the Vietnam War, 12-year-old Debbie's sister Krista is born blind in one eye with a hole in her heart. Although she survives risky open heart surgery, months pass and she doesn't babble or crawl like normal babies do. Doctors decide Krista is cognitively challenged and advise her parents to put her into an institution. Well, not on Debbie's watch. She's sure Krista is deaf, but no one will believe a 12-year-old kid. So, along with the medical drama, Debbie is dealing with problems at school and friends that move away, and she refuses to give in to self pity and soldiers on as Krista's champion. But Debbie's optimism falters when her father's next orders send him to the war in Vietnam. She wonders if she can hang on for her mother and for her sister and prepare for life without dad. So let's talk more about Reaching into Silence by Linda Sammaritan. So, what are your overall impressions, Rebecca?
Well, I think, this is a middle grade book, and I think that this is a really good book for families that have a child who has some sort of, um, whether they be deaf, blind, any kind of, um, excuse me,
A
medical
disability.
issue,
Mhm.
disability of some sort, because it really does a good job of um, making those things not negative. They're very positively looked at.
Mhm.
And the whole idea of family coming together and of championing, the cause for a person who is too young to do that for themselves, of not giving up, of thinking that there is hope, keeping that ideal of hope in the forefront. This is a good book for that. And she does a really good job of um, showing that, as a sibling of someone like this, you have a role that you can play, and you're important in their life. And it doesn't have to be a down side to it, right? It can be an up. And I like that about this book.
Yeah. Yeah, even though this book does take place in the mid 60s, so it's part historical. It is a middle grade book, so this is a little bit different genre for us to read. It is about a military family, which I was raised in a military family in the 60s and 70s, so could totally relate to those details, which I thought were very accurate throughout the book. But even though it's a historical book and you may not like the historical or want something more contemporary, I think what you said, the overall themes of the book, the family coming together, and even if there's a child that has a disability or something like that, it is not the end of the world. There's so much to be done and so much hope to have, and the way the families can rally around. And so I think that's universal, no matter what the time period is.
I agree. And, the idea of losing friends, having to move, that is also universal. I mean, I work in a school and I see that all the time. It might not even be for military cause, it's
Yeah.
for work or whatever. And kids have to move. And yes, it is easier to stay in touch nowadays, but it's still a long distance relationship. And back then obviously it wasn't even that, because it was so expensive to call long distance, and there was, limits on that. And especially with, Debbie's family having this child who needed so much care, money was tight. They couldn't spend extra on, any of those kinds of things. And so um yet they managed to visit family. They managed to, give them experiences. She did have some really wonderful experiences with friends. And I thought that all of that was really good. And just the view of military life, what it's like to be a military kid, it's still that way today. Oh, and like I said, it does translate into other things as well. So I think those are all very worthwhile reasons to pick this book up and maybe read it as a family or as part of a group, to get that kind of the information out of it that's really there and can be used even today.
Even very, very much today. This book is written from the first person point of view of Debbie, of the 12-year-old sister, who is the oldest of the four kids, and Krista, the little sister, who was born deaf, being the youngest. And even her brothers, I mean, they were such fun characters on that. But written, again, Debbie's point of view, and I think you said this well before we started recording, that this is like a fictionalized memoir. So you're in the viewpoint of Debbie, you're experiencing everything she is as, a member of a military family, as a child with a father who eventually is going to get sent to Vietnam, of a mother who's trying to keep everything together, especially with a sick child who has to undergo this major surgery, and meanwhile keep the other two boys in line in the family. And it's also about community, because the military families, the neighbors across the street, helped a lot
Hmm.
with while Krista was in the hospital, the baby. Then you're, as the other kids got farmed off to their friends, and it was that way on military bases. There was that sense of community, because y'all were all there together, at least for that time frame, until
Yeah,
somebody got transferred. So
right. And this book, we just follow the first, is it 2 years? Is Krista two when she somewhere in there?
right.
She's it's only it's like a couple of years or so.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a little more than that, but I
Might be a
can't
little
remember
more.
exactly. But and in that time frame, the medical discoveries, of course, but this is in the 60s, so things today have changed. But I relate to the fear that Debbie had when Krista had to have the surgery,
Mm.
because I had open heart surgery as well, but I was 7 when I had mine. And so I remember being in the hospital, and I remember other little babies having this surgery. And it was terrifying. I mean, my parents were terrified, and I was 7, so I can't imagine what. I mean, they told me later, how awful it was for these parents waiting in the waiting room for these little babies that were 2 and 3 days old, having this surgery and not knowing whether they were going to survive it or not. So I related to that section as well, and the fear that they all had, when this was going on. But it was just interesting to listen to how, these medical professionals just wanted to write off this child as if she was nothing.
Mhm.
And Debbie would not hear of that. And neither of the parents really weren't buying into it. They were buying into it a little more, but not like completely. But Debbie was just the staunch supporter, of Krista. And Debbie was certain that she was not mentally challenged, which was what they kept insisting. So it was really neat to watch how Debbie, as a 12-year-old, tried to impress upon these people that, hey, you're wrong. This is not the problem. There's a different thing. So I liked watching that play out too.
Well, Debbie's a spunky kid. I wish I had been that spunky at 12 years old. And she is fighting for her sister, and takes the role of the eldest child in the family quite seriously. And she was all excited to have a little sister. So she was going to be Krista's champion, um,
Hmm.
no matter what on this. Yeah, the book does a good job. Again, we've talked about military life, and it does a good job establishing that, and a good job of, yeah, back in the 60s, if there's anything wrong with your kids, you put them in an institution. And that's just something unheard of today. And in a sense, that because the military provides the medical care, they couldn't exactly take Krista to the top hospital in New York City or whatever. They definitely couldn't afford that, not on the military pay, and not on so they were really, stuck with who they had at whatever base they were stationed at the time, in general. As we've mentioned, the story is a middle grade novel. It is written a little bit differently too. It's not just chapter by chapter. It's a little more episodic or anecdotal, or it's like little slices of life as Krista comes
Mhm.
into the family, and not
Yes.
necessarily completely fluid like a novel would be. I don't know how to explain it without
Yeah.
sounding like it
Because
is a novel.
yeah, because I think because the main story is really Krista, but yet she's too young to really be, you can't be in her head. She's too young for that. And so you get the sister's viewpoint. Well, there's a lot of things distracting the sister, that she's got all these, she's preteen, and then all these new moves and all this stuff that's pressing on her. So you just kind of get her, it's almost like a stream of consciousness type of
Mhm.
story where
Mhm.
you're whatever she's going through at the time, that's kind of what you get. And so yeah, it's not your typical um plotted novel where you have all these different beats, right? It's a little different from that, but the story is still there
Oh yeah.
underlying, but
Mhm.
it's just not, yeah, it's not going to be exactly what you, it's not like a Nancy Drew or, some of those little stories. It's not like that. It's different from that.
Yeah, it's written in a different way, but it makes it interesting to read. And
Hmm.
again, it is written for a younger audience, and so they can keep up with the little snippets of story, or Debbie's stream of consciousness as she's dealing with, like I said, friends moving away, them moving to a new place, bullies at school, all the typical stuff. She is
Hmm.
dealing with the normal preteen stuff, along with, hey, my little sister is, there's not a cognitive problem here, it's deafness, and how does she make her parents listen to that? I mentioned this is book one of a 3-book series. The series is called World Without Sound, relating to the deafness, I think. And the book is a satisfying conclusion, but it's definitely somewhat of a cliffhanger,
Hmm.
um, that to really make you want to read the next book and see what happens. The story does continue in the next books.
Yes. And there's all three are published now, so you don't have to wait.
Well,
So they're all out. You can just go pick them all up. So,
no, that's all fun. I think this was a well done book. Again, to be prepared that it is more memoir style, even though it's a fictional book. It is more episodic than chapter by chapter plotted out from beginning to end, but you are caught up in this family, in Debbie's family, and in their story, and how, it's a military family caring for their kids, and
mhm.
and watching, Debbie grow up here. And she's facing all these preteen things, so it'll definitely keep your interest, and definitely, I think you want to keep reading the next 2 books in the series too.
Mhm.
Well, I think we give this, high ratings here. Just different, knowing it's a different story, different
Mhm.
than a typical novel. So,
Yes.
yeah, but I enjoy, again, as someone who was raised in the military and things like that. I so related to the time period, and the friends coming and going, and it was done so well. You could tell. I guess Linda had lived a life similar growing up that way.
Yes.
Well, we will look forward to talking to her about that. I think she and I could probably talk all day long about this kind of stuff, but we'll talk about I think all 3 books together, but I think you need to start with Reaching into Silence. The
Mhm.
author again is Linda Sammaritan, Sammaritan, since that's a long name. Samaritan, and again, Reaching into Silence. And it's a book worth reading, and it's a book, um, I don't know, for young and old. I don't think you have to be a middle grader to enjoy this story.
Yeah, I think everybody could find something in it that they would really enjoy, that they would like.
So
So,
they relate. Hey, it's a story of family, and we've all got
mhm.
that. And it's always the importance of how families work together, through their struggles, and grow up. So I like that. So if you want a good family story, a good middle grade story written in a little bit different style, then yeah, I think this one is for you. So Um, next month, Linda will be joining us, and we look forward to talking to her about this. And then our next book after that, we will be talking in November and December with Lisa Jordan, and a romance. We're just going to go to a nice old-fashioned sweet romance, Redeeming the Cowboy, to end our year on. So we hope you will join us in the next several months as we close out 2023. But join us in October as we talk to Linda Sammaritan about reaching into silence. All right. I guess we'll see y'all next time. So.
Yep. Bye.